Well, hello there, friends. Let's talk a little bit about detail. You know, one of the things that I always was told early in my writing is that I needed more detail. I needed to describe things better. And that always frustrated me because I spent a long time trying to make myself just brief. Because believe it or not, I like to talk. It's probably how I ended up on YouTube. But I just really like to talk, and I like to talk about everything, and I can talk about things ad nauseum. But I spend a lot of time trying to figure out how to condense my words, how to communicate the greatest amount of information in the shortest amount of sentences. And then I started writing fiction. And all of a sudden people were like, hey, Seth, there's not enough information here. We need to know more. I can't place myself in this scene. I'm like a floating head in the abyss, and things are happening in front of me, but I don't know where I am. And so I had to unlearn some of the things that I had learned. I had to figure out how to add more detail. But I didn't want to do it in the way that annoyed me when I read. So sometimes you'll read a book, and in the story, they start describing something, and then you turn the page, and they're still describing it. And then you turn the page again, and they're still describing it. Let me know in the comments if you have an example of that kind of writing. But rather than adopt that sort of verbose style, I wanted something short, punchy, a little bit more Hemingway than Tolkien, if you know what I mean. So what I ended up doing was I ended up looking around for a variety of methodologies that I could use to increase the amount of detail that I was giving without overwhelming my reader or finding it boring myself to write. And what I discovered was help in an unlikely place. It started when I read a book on screenwriting. And one of the things that the screenwriting book mentioned was that you have to take into consideration the mood of the shot and the mood of the scene when you are writing it. Because it's a visual medium, the action that the characters take and the way they interact with the things around them will tell as much of the story as their words do. Now, in a book, we don't have the same visual medium, but we do have the opportunity to describe how our character interacts with their space. And eventually, I was able to settle on sort of a method of introducing detail into a scene that I think might be helpful to you. So, imagine with me that you have a scene. The first thing you want to do is you want to pick a mood for it. You want to understand, is this a positive scene? Is this a negative scene? Is this a scary scene? Is this a hopeful scene? Is this a scene that is just intended to convey information without being too boring? Is this a scene of high adventure? Is this a scene of deep despair? What is the scene? We do the same thing in world building, where we identify what's called a core concept in our world, and our visitant, the person who's coming into our world to experience it, should have a clear sense of what that is, whether or not we've spelled it out. And you want the same for a scene. You want a very clear sense of what this is. Your reader should not be confused about how they should be feeling. They should just have the feelings by the time the scene is done. And once you have done that, once you've picked a mood, you then want to decide, how do I establish the shot? So in film, you'll often see a shot that happens or that exists for a few seconds on the screen before there's any dialogue or before there's any action, right? Anime is particularly good at this because you'll be moving through a story and then it'll flash to effectively a still shot of something. And that shot is what tells you how you should be feeling. If, let's say, your character is entering a forest and you want it to be spooky, right? And then we're going to have a big reversal, and it's going to be sort of fun and joyful, or whimsical, right? Instead of scary. And so we want our reader to leave with a whimsical feeling. But what we really want is we want the feeling of the juxtaposition between the character thinks everything is scary and everything is actually whimsical. We want that to be the feeling. which incidentally is a different feeling than they would have if they thought everything was whimsical and then all of a sudden it turned into scary, right? Those are two completely different scenes, two completely different effects, but we can achieve both of them using the same methodology. But in our case, I'm going to talk you through the example of everything's scary at first, and then it's actually just whimsical, right? And so the way we do this is we set the scene with a limited shot. That is, we show the forest that they're walking into, and we identify a couple of things, right? The long shadows, the grasping branches, the moon shining eerily through the trees, the blinking eyes of some unnamed animal, right? That flash for a moment and then vanish into the darkness. And we can set all of those little details, but the important thing is that we are not showing the full picture. Because what we want to do is we want to zoom in on the feeling. We don't want to just have a bunch of stuff happen in that space. Instead, we want to clarify the feeling for our readers by zooming in on the details. And so, our character walks into the forest, turning their head to look at whatever it was that flitted by in the shadows, and they trip, right? Their foot gets caught in a tangling root, and the way we describe the root is ultimately going to determine how people feel about that scene, right? The way we describe them scraping against the rough bark, the way we describe what they land in when they fall, all of those small details, all of those tiny little things are going to push the scene even further and give a clearer picture. Because what we're doing is we are not trying to represent the actual exact picture-perfect scene. Instead, what we're doing is we are majoring on a feeling, and we are letting the reader fill in all the details themselves. Because all we need, actually, is the base shot, right? Not too far zoomed in, not too far zoomed out. It's just, the twisted trees with their grasping fingers, the light, the moon eerily through the branches, our character walking in, tripping on a root and, scraping against the rough bark, and squelching as they land in the at the forest floor. And then there's a rustle in the bushes as they're laying there. And so I haven't described all of the kinds of trees. I haven't described all of the leaves. I haven't described all of the details of the forest. What I've done is I've just established the mood for the scene. And you can do this in any way, right? When somebody walks into an inn, you can give 2 or 3 details that will ultimately set the tone of the scene. And now that we've set the scene, how do I make the switch? How do I shift from scary, which is what we've been going for so far, to, everything is actually whimsical and everything is actually fine and okay, right? This is ultimately a positive scene. All I have to do is zoom out, right? Because, again, in order to focus in on the feeling, I've been zooming in slowly. Well, all I have to do to change the scene is just zoom out. Give a few more details, right? And so the bushes rustle, and out pops a big fluffy rabbit or a giant toadstool, right? With a little fairy riding on top. Or maybe there are a dozen fairies who are tap dancing. I don't know. The point is that I give the detail, right, at the same level as I had zoomed into, and then I zoom out. Because what's happening is the character's awareness is zooming out. Anytime that we have a strong feeling, our vision narrows. And the same thing is going to happen to our character, and the same thing is happening to our reader. Anytime we focus on a feeling, our vision narrows. But when we want to shift into a different feeling, all we have to do is zoom right back out. And so again, we start with a detail that is at the same level as the detail we just finished with. So the bushes have rustled. And out pops this, toadstool with fairies dancing on top. And then all of a sudden, a soft, warm wind blows through the forest, and the leaves begin to, or the branches, as they sway, begin to let off a light music. Our character sits up. The little cloud that had obscured most of the moon moves away, and it's bright and it's full, shedding all of this light on the scene, taking us from darkness into light. So I hope you can understand what I'm doing here, right? When I want to demonstrate a specific mood, I'm zooming in, right? And I'm getting narrower and narrower and narrower with one or two details, preferably one, at sort of every level of awareness, from the macro down to the micro. But then when I want to shift, when I want to reestablish the mood, when I want to make a change in the scene or introduce a new feeling, all I have to do is start zooming out. And I can stop at any point along there to sort of fine-tune exactly what I'm trying to create, the effect that I'm trying to create. But that's all you have to remember. Zoom in when you want to focus on a feeling, and zoom right back out when you want to change it. So I hope that is a helpful way to think about how to write detail and how to avoid overwriting, because that's a really common thing. I do it, everybody does it, but we want to avoid it as much as possible, right? We want to give sort of the right amount of detail for what it is that we're trying to create. And so we're going to zoom in to focus on the feeling, and then we're going to zoom out to change it. So anyway, I hope that is helpful for you, a bit of more of a practical video that hopefully you can implement into your writing.